All right. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am joined by Nikki, aka the Liberty Doll.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents.
Some of you may know her from, I've featured her on my Beauty and Brain series. And today, we're going to be having a discussion about the Mollie Tibbetts case and what it might say about gun control. But first, I'm going to give Nikki an opportunity. I'm pretty sure most of you who follow my channel already know who she is, but I will give her an opportunity to quick introduce herself. So Nikki, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm the Liberty Doll. Sorry, I'm trying to mute the chat and it's not working. So I am a Libertarian YouTuber and I also talk a lot about the Second Amendment. You can find me on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Gab, though I never use it, Minds. I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's all of them.
Well, it's an ever-growing amount since with the whole issue of YouTube, Facebook censorship and all that. And I will just quick let everyone know, if you haven't yet started a Minds account, BitChute, Gab, any of that, all turning out to be decent platforms. Anyways, just to bring everyone up to speed, I know I've talked about this on my 2 Day with 2 Cents news series, but what happened a couple weeks ago now was Mollie Tibbetts was a 20-year-old in Iowa who went for a jog one day. An undocumented immigrant by the name of Christian Rivera drove up behind her, got out of his car, started running with her, according to his testimony. Mollie pulled out her phone and threatened. She said, "I'm going to call the police if you don't leave me alone." Then, according to Rivera's testimony, he, I guess, quote, blacked out. Later waking up, realizing that he'd killed her, he brought her to a cornfield. Now, whether or not he's telling the truth about his blackout, I find it somewhat improbable. But in any case, given the fact that Rivera is an undocumented immigrant, the whole Mollie Tibbetts case really became a discussion about illegal immigration. What are we going to do about it? And while I think immigration is an important discussion in its own right, one thing I haven't really heard anybody talking about is the fact that had she been armed, she would likely still be alive. And since I know, well, I myself concealed carry, but Nikki, I know you do as well. And since you're also a female who potentially has had issues with guys making unwanted advances against you before, I thought you might have something to say on the subject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so reading about this case, you're right. Everyone immediately went the route of, illegal immigration and oh, this only happened because this guy was an immigrant. But really, it's something that happened and the guy just so happened to be an immigrant. These things happen all the time. I had my own situation with who I call Creepy Van Man a few years ago. I wasn't jogging, but I was out walking my dog and this guy started following me around the neighborhood. Every time I went out, it didn't matter, if I changed the time, the walking routes. And at one point he even ended up in front of my house and I filed police reports. And it turned out when I went down to the police station, the officer there was like, "Oh, you're the girl from such and such street reporting this." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Oh, okay, you're the other girl from this other street that made this report." And I was like, "No, brand new girl making a brand new report." So this guy that had been following me around my neighborhood was already following around 2 other women that had reported him. So it is something that happens. And in the end, the police didn't do anything about it. They told me they couldn't do anything about it because he hadn't done anything illegal yet. But his behavior definitely was escalating. Like I said, it got to the point where he would park in front of my house in the mornings. And so, yeah, I definitely advocate that women especially conceal carry if they can, because these things do happen. And just like I said, Mollie Tibbetts, it just so happened that the guy that did it was an immigrant.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the note of your experience with the police, I think another important thing to talk about here is a lot of gun control advocates will say you don't need to have a gun, you don't need to protect yourself. The reason is because the police will protect you. Well, obviously, you in your own experience there, the police really didn't do anything for you. Now,
Nope.
you can make the argument that he hadn't done anything illegal yet. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the court case Warren versus District of Columbia, which was in the appeals court for DC, tried in 1981, there was a situation where 3 women were all living in the same apartment complex. 2 men broke in and raped one of the women. The 2 other women, hearing what had happened, called the police. The police classified it as a code 2, which is lower than the highest priority crime that they could. 4 police cruisers responded to the scene. Some of them, I guess, walked up to the door, knocked. When no one answered, they left. The police, seeing that the 2 other women, seeing that the police had left, called the police again. But when the dispatcher relayed the second call, he didn't let the further officers know that there had already been 1 call. Later on, thinking that the police might be in the household already, the 2 women who had called the police called down to the woman who was being raped, trying to find out if she'd been helped, which alerted the 2 intruders to their presence. They then kidnapped all 3 women, brought them to one of the intruders' apartments, and for the next 14 hours, they were all at knife point, forced to do all kinds of unspeakable sexual acts. Now, when this all came to an end, the DC police were sued for negligence, and when it finally reached the appeals court, the court ruled that the police did nothing wrong because, quote, and here's a quotation from the actual case, "A publicly maintained police force constitutes a basic governmental service provided to the benefit of the community at large by promoting public peace, safety, and good order. The extent and quality of police protection afforded to the community necessarily depends upon the availability of public resources and upon legislative or administrative determinations concerning allocation of those resources." It goes on to say that at any given time, publicly furnished police protection may accrue to the personal benefit of individual citizens, but at all times the needs and interests of the community at large predominate. Private resources and needs have little direct effect upon the nature of police services provided to the public. So in other words, they basically ruled that the police have no obligation to protect you as an individual. They only have an obligation to protect the community at large. Therefore, if police fail to protect you under any given circumstances, tough luck. That was never their job to begin with.
Right. I mean, and in my case, the crazy thing was the police, and it was a female police officer. She said to me, "Oh, well, there's nothing we can do, and he hasn't done anything wrong. So next time you see him, approach him and go up to the window and see if you can take his picture." Seriously? That is seriously the police advice, to try to go up to this guy in his creepy van and take a picture of him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I even got a license plate number and I gave it to them. I made a second police report and I gave them the license number, and they still were like, "Oh, well, see if you can take a picture of his face. You want me to get that close to a guy that's been stalking me to take a picture?" Insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah. It also makes me think of one of my favorite books on the issue of self-defense and what people can do to protect themselves is The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. And something he points out is that I don't remember the exact percentage off the top of my head, but when it comes to women who are killed by their stalkers, it was at least more than 50% of them actually had a restraining order on the person they were being stalked by at the time.
Wow.
Obviously showing that at the end of the day, a restraining order is just a piece of paper. And
absolutely.
Yes. And even if the police are aware, they aren't going to, until such time as the man actually commits a crime, they're not going to arrest him. And by then it can be too late, which is why I say the notion that the reason people don't need to carry firearms is because the police will protect you is just obviously untrue. But beyond that, what frustrates me the most is that gun control advocates, most of the time, and obviously there could be exceptions to this, but most of the time, people who are the strongest advocates of gun control also claim to be the most pro-feminist, pro-woman people in America. Yet
Right.
they are against women women in these situations who want to carry firearms for their own protection. They are against them being able to purchase guns, or they support laws that, for example, suppose a woman is being stalked by her ex-husband. She has reason to believe that he's going to get violent, but because she had an ounce of marijuana in her pocket when she was 16 years old, she can't legally purchase a firearm.
Right.
Mhm.
And Massachusetts even has a law where if you were arrested as a minor and found to be an adjudicated delinquent, which means that you committed a crime that if you were an adult that had been found guilty, you could face up to a year in prison. That's what that means, adjudicated delinquent. So if you were an adjudicated delinquent, you cannot own a firearm. You can't get a license, nothing, which is ridiculous. And actually, when they passed that law, tons of cops lost their licenses. And on top of it, tasers are illegal in Massachusetts. And pepper spray was also illegal without a license to carry up until a couple years ago. They just switched it over where now you can just get it with an FID card, but you still have to go to the police station and either get an FID card or prove to the police that you are a woman in a domestic violence situation in order to be allowed to carry pepper spray.
Okay. And
But, so progressive.
certainly. And I'm going to assume that it is at the department's discretion to decide whether or not
absolutely.
her concerns are really legitimate. So, it could be the case, she's being stalked now. She needs a way to defend herself now. But of course, everything moves at the speed of bureaucracy. So-and-so's got to sign off on it after so-and-so signs off on it. And at any point in the approval process, someone can arbitrarily decide they don't think she really needs pepper spray to defend herself.
Right.
And not saying pepper spray isn't useful. It certainly is, but it's
the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, exactly. Compared to a firearm, it's not going to. And interestingly enough, at least 1% of the population is immune to pepper spray entirely. So there's
really?
Although
I didn't know that.
Yes, it's very rare, but there is at least 1% of the population that is entirely immune to it. And even those that are not immune can be trained to overcome it. I mean, even police officers who carry pepper spray are required to be sprayed with pepper spray, and then usually fight the way the qualification works. And I know there are a lot of videos of this actually happening on YouTube. Police officers in their training are sprayed with pepper spray and then required to actually fight through a kind of obstacle course, if you will, where other officers have setups and they have to, handcuff people or disarm someone or whatever the case may be while they're under the effects of pepper spray, which in itself proves that is not going to be sufficient. Although a useful tool is not something that can be relied on to stop someone in all situations.
Right. But I mean, definitely one of the shortcomings of, feminism has many shortcomings, but one of them is just this refusal to accept that men and women are different. Men and women are obviously biologically different. There's differences in physiology, there's differences in strength, even down to the way our skin connects to our muscles and everything with the connective tissue is different between men and women. And historically, women needed big, strong men around in order to protect them. So historically, you're home alone and, your man is out hunting or whatever. Someone breaks in and decides to rape you. It's going to happen. There's nothing to stop them. So in this regard, firearms are really the great equalizer that women can take ownership and can take self-responsibility. But, the feminists, the social justice warriors, to be able to admit that a firearm is an equalizer, they would have to admit that women and men are different. And, Massachusetts, like I've said, is such a progressive, quote unquote, place. There was even this woman that was kidnapped and brought to an ATM and forced to drain all of her bank accounts maybe a year or two ago out in Dorchester. And women all over the city started getting freaked out because they just thought like, oh man, I'm going to be kidnapped and forced to empty my bank accounts, blah, blah, blah. The city's solution was to hand out rape whistles to scared women. Legitimately. They were handing out rape whistles to women because these women were afraid of getting kidnapped.
Yes. So as you're being raped, blow that whistle. I mean, and hope someone comes to help. In all honesty, I think if most people, if they hear a whistle, are probably just going to get confused. But I forget, and I always forget the name of the woman in this case. But there's a very famous case in New York where a woman was raped, left bleeding on the street, and something like 200 people walked by her and did nothing while she bled to death.
Oh.
Which, a tragic situation. And I would argue all 200 of those people should have done something, but nonetheless, you can't. No one should care more about your life than you should.
Right.
I certainly hope that there's enough good people out there that would come to your aid if they're able. But as we already established, the police are not under. The courts have ruled the police are not under obligation to help you. Now, I want to just quick say I do personally know many law enforcement officers who I know to be dedicated to their jobs and did actually go into the law enforcement profession with a genuine desire to help others. But as an institution, they're not required to protect you. You can't depend on someone else coming to your aid. And at the end of the day, no one should care more about your own safety than you should. And as you said, firearms are the ultimate equalizer. So I think you were going to cut in there. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as regards to, all those people that walked by and did nothing, I think that's even more of an argument to take the responsibility for your own life, because it's actually a psychological phenomenon called the bystander effect, where basically people will not help. They will not step in and help another person because they believe that someone else is going to. So like, oh, well, I don't have to do that because someone else is. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's been in the literature for decades. Like scientists have known about it. That's just the way humans work.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's self-evidently true that human beings are selfish. Therefore, the question is not, are human beings going to be selfish, but what systems can we implement that actually takes advantage of that fact, which is, of course, why I'm a capitalist. It's the only economic system that takes people's selfishness and forces them to serve one another, because that's the only way they can achieve the things that they want for selfish reasons. Of course, that's a whole nother topic. Another thing I did want to say, when you brought up the whole point of feminists being unable to acknowledge that there are biological differences between men and women, I certainly know a lot of people like to watch those movies where 120-pound women are beating up 8 280-pound guys at once. I'm as big a fan of the Avengers as anyone. Black Widow is really cool. But the reality of the situation is the vast majority of women do not, even, as someone who has studied martial arts myself, as good as you might get at martial arts, there's even the greatest black belt, if taken off guard, can still have the crap beaten out of him or her in that case. And it's just not the case that any woman who's been to a self-defense class, which I encourage, I'm not saying you shouldn't attend those kinds of classes. They can be useful. They can save your life. But in a hand-to-hand conflict, a 5'4", 120-pound woman is not going to be knocking out a 6'4", 280-pound man. It's just not going to happen. but as you said, guns really are the ultimate equalizer. And again, this is, I wish I was better at remembering every quotation I've ever read, but there's one that comes from that comes from the Middle Ages, when gunpowder was first being introduced in Europe, and it was someone saying that knight and serf were both brought to the same battlefield with the coming of black powder or something, just basically pointing out that even the knight who had armor and a sword and years training in combat could be taken out easily by a serf with a firearm. They were the ultimate equalizer.
There actually used to be this TV show that was on Spike TV like years and years ago, and I can't remember what it was called, but they would take two like random historical warriors or whatever and say if they got into a
Deadliest Warrior,
fight,
Spike TV.
yes. And they did a knight versus a pirate, and the pirate won just because he had guns.
Yes. And what was interesting in season one, I've watched every episode of that. I remember it was on Netflix for a while, so I can say yep, it was. That was way back when Netflix was really new. But I had just gotten it. And one of the first things I did was watch every episode of that show. The season 1 finale, they basically took all the warriors that had won in season 1, and they were gonna try to do the matchup between the best. Mm-hmm. But what they ended up having 2 matches because the scientists on the show basically pointed out, they said once the firearm was invented, warfare was fundamentally changed. So they had 2 different battles, one pre-firearms and the other post-firearms. And the pre-firearm battle, as I recall, was the Spartan and the Samurai. And then the post-firearm battle was the Spetsnaz and the Irish Republican Army. But
oh wow,
yeah, but they acknowledged the plan had initially been to only have 1 battle, but they had to break it up into 2 just because they said if they tried to do Spartan versus Spetsnaz, I mean, no contest. The Spetsnaz would win simply because he's got a firearm. And the 300 Spartans were totally amazing, but they'd probably have been even more amazing had they had firearms.
That would have been scary.
Yes.
Oh goodness.
All right. I'm taking a look at the chat at the moment. I see Hey Dude 77 says, a friend of mine when I went to trucking school said he watched a 4-foot 11-inch Marine general send 4 guys out on stretchers when they jumped him. That is very cool. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that are so proficient in hand-to-hand combat that they can't do such feats. I'm simply saying the vast majority of people aren't going to be able to. And I guarantee that 4-foot 11-inch general, as good as he was at hand-to-hand combat, if taken by surprise under the right situation, still would prefer to have a firearm on him.
Well, I mean, and he could have been like really jacked too.
Also, valid point. Right. Well, that is certainly a lot to say there, but it's all pretty straightforward. So watching, if there is any questions you have for Nikki or myself, now is the time to post them in the chat. And I know there's a delay between me saying that and when you guys will actually hear it. So I'm going to pause quick and let the comments post up. But Nikki, if you did have anything more you wanted to say, please feel free to do so.
Well, I see that someone in there says that social justice culture causes mass shootings. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with that because mass shootings did start. Well, I mean, the first big one was in the 80s. And it ended up being used as propaganda for, assault rifle.
Yeah, that totally made up term that no one can quite deny. No one can quite define.
But I recently did a video on school shootings, at least, and the numbers behind that. And if you look at all the places that have had these big school shootings, they have 2 things in common. One, they have a really bad local economy in that there's a lot of unemployment, there's a high foreclosure rates, property values are low. So you have that going on. And you also have really poor access to mental health. You look at like the top 5 or 6 states in the country for access to mental health care, and they largely have not had any big shootings like this. And obviously someone that goes and kills some girl and brings her to a cornfield, or someone that shoots up a school, either way, that's not someone that's mentally healthy or stable. Happy, healthy, normal, average people don't do things like that. So I think like everyone says like, oh, well, this is a gun problem, it's a violence problem, it's an immigration problem. But really overarching all that is a mental health problem for sure. And I guess you could argue that social justice warrior culture is a mental health problem.
well, it's actually, as far as the social justice culture thing goes, with the recent Florida shooting, of course, the media really, most of the legacy media tried to downplay this, but the fact of the matter was that the young man who committed that shooting had already had the police called to his house on, it was something like 22 occasions.
Mm-hmm.
He had himself gone to the school's counseling department and said he was thinking about doing it and tried to get help, which he was denied. So as mental health is definitely a concern, and it's obvious that at least in that case, it was very clear. There were plenty of warning signs showing that the young man was disturbed. He did indeed have mental health problems, which the school and the local police department chose to ignore, then letting him go about his shooting spree. Of course, we all know how well the Broward County Sheriff's Department actually responded to that. And yet the sheriff had the balls to go on TV and say the whole thing's a gun control problem and the NRA is at fault.
Right. And the thing is that the amount of times that the police responded to calls about this kid and knew that he was making threats and all this. I mean, I don't know about in Florida. I'm assuming it's the same in Florida as it is in Massachusetts. Mental health people can section someone here. It's called, oh God, wow, I can't even remember. That's terrible. Section 12. Here it's called a Section 12. It's got a different name everywhere else. But it's basically when you say, okay, you need to be evaluated by a mental health hospital to make sure that you are okay and have an involuntary 3-day stay to make sure that you're safe or the person that you're threatening is safe, whatever. It's not just like therapists and psychologists that can do those. The police can also do those. And whether or not they should have that power is a whole other argument. But the fact of the matter is, they usually don't do them just because they don't want to do the paperwork. At least when I've had to do them here, when I've had to section people, I fax in the paperwork to the police and they're supposed to fill it out and they don't do it. So... the counselors could have sectioned this guy. The police could have sectioned this guy. Something could have been done. Even just the fact that he made threats against people, that's something that's covered under the Tarasoff laws. And the Tarasoff laws are this set of laws around mandated reporting, where if someone makes a threat, you are mandated to alert the person or the institution, whatever that they are threatening. You have to call the police and they have to get evaluated. And that law was created because there was actually someone out in California, I believe, who went to counseling and told this counselor that he was planning on killing a girl, and the counselor didn't do anything about it. And then the girl got murdered. And I mean, there are a couple states that don't abide by Tarasoff, but I'm pretty sure Florida is. So multiple people dropped the ball on this one. This is definitely a shooting that could have been prevented. But then again, most of them could have been prevented.
And even obviously the mental health of caring for people who have mental health problems is definitely an issue. Another thing would be the level of security we have in schools. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I did the research for this more than a year ago when I was in graduate school, but I wrote a paper comparing several school shootings, and one paper that I found, it was published it was in I don't remember the name of it was either the Crime Research Journal or it's one of the primary criminal justice peer-reviewed papers that is published. There was a study done comparing various countries. One thing that the authors of the paper particularly drew attention to was that in Israel in the 1970s, there was a very notable hostage situation in which members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization kidnapped Israeli school children during the school day. After that situation, nationwide reform was put in place where, being that Israel is a country where they have compulsory military service, just about all the teachers are actually military veterans. They instituted basically all public schools now have armed guards, and the teachers are themselves carrying weapons. And since they did that, they had zero kidnapping, shootings, anything of that nature. Now, as I said, that research is more than a year old, so if there has been one in that time, I don't know. But it's worth noting that when they went from minimal security to having, the teachers actually carrying weapons, they went down to 0 such incidents.
Well, I mean, a criminal is not going to go into a place knowing that there's a bunch of armed people, because that, A, makes it possible that they're going to be a lot less successful, and B, makes it possible that they're going to die.
Yes. But then if there's a sign on the wall that explicitly says no firearms, they can rest with confidence knowing that no one who is a law-abiding citizen will be carrying, and therefore, what do they have to fear?
A sign is a sign.
Yes. Of course, I love I've used this clip in several of my videos, but there was a sketch that was done on Fox News a couple years ago, basically making fun of gun-free zones. But it's two guys are sitting together talking about gun violence, and the announcer says, "Are you worried about gun violence, but don't think having your own guns isn't the solution? Well, now there's a better way. It's called gun-free zone." And then it cuts to a scene where there's a gas station and a man walks in with a shotgun, holds it. He's like, "Give me the money, old man." And the guy says, "You can't." And he says, "I said, give me the money." And the cashier says, "Look," and points at the gun-free zone sign. And the criminal sees the sign and then goes, "Gun-free zone, damn it," and turns around and walks out. And of course, everybody laughs. But yeah, is that really what you're expecting to happen? Because to those on the gun control side, they seem to believe that just putting that sign up is somehow going to stop them.
I was definitely in a hospital the other day that had a sign that said gun-free zone, and I definitely walked in carrying and walked around the hospital there for like an hour. Nothing happened. There was no like invisible force field. Lightning did not strike me down. I mean, the only time you really have to like follow the sign is like if you're going into a courthouse or something, or like someplace that has metal detectors, or like police that search your bag. Then you can't really carry.
Yes, well, I know in the state that I live in, if you have a concealed carry permit and you enter a business that has that is marked as a gun-free zone, and they find you to be carrying legally, they can ask you to leave. But unless you refuse, they can't actually charge you with a crime. I do know that in states like New York, where simply being in possession of a firearm is a crime. I have done the research, and if someone can find a case that proves this wrong, then I will stand corrected. I have yet to find a case where the police actually arrested someone for being in possession of a firearm that they know to have intended the person was going to commit a crime, and because of the law, they were able to stop. They can conclusively say a crime was stopped because of our gun laws. However, I was able to find more than a dozen cases where law-abiding citizens simply attempting to either carry a firearm to protect themselves, or I know there was one case where a woman was changing planes. Her flight was canceled. She had a firearm, which she had declared to TSA. She had gone through all the proper procedures to ensure it was in the right kind of lock case to be on to be on a airplane. Her flight was canceled. She was forced to change planes at JFK Airport in New York. When she went up to the counter, as TSA protocol dictates, she declared to the agent at the gate that she had a firearm and that she had gone through the procedures to ensure it was properly stored. The agent leaves, goes get the police, and she was charged with a felony for unlawful possession of a firearm in the state of New York. Now, ooh. I mean, good for you, New York police. You arrested a woman who went to great lengths to ensure that she was properly transporting her firearm. Yet, I don't really see who you protected from a dangerous crime. All you did was give a woman who was trying to follow the law, convicted her of a felony, which she ended up serving several months. I mean, I believe she was able to get out of actually serving the 10-year sentence that came with that. But
wow. Because I know, like, when I got my license, we talked to a firearms lawyer, and he told us that basically, if I'm going to travel, I'm supposed to call the state police in each state that I'm going through first to warn them that I'm coming through, and be like, hey, I have this gun, but it's in its proper storage, blah, blah, blah. I'm going from point A to point B. But like, it's something like if you spend more than like 24 hours or something there. I don't know. It's weird stuff. I've considered you can apply for out-of-state licenses in Utah, I think, and there's another state that ends up covering like 32 states if you get the license from there. But it's from my understanding, it's kind of difficult to get an out-of-state, like non-resident license, but you can do it. It's Utah and I forget the other state, but of course it doesn't cover anything in New England.
Of course not. Or the other case I know of was I believe this gentleman ended up getting pardoned by Governor Chris Christie, but in New Jersey, there a situation like you said. He actually called. He was moving to Pennsylvania. The route he was taking required him to drive through New Jersey. He called the New Jersey State Police beforehand to find out what he was supposed to do. They told him so long as his firearms were disassembled and locked, he would be fine. While driving through New Jersey, he was stopped at a random checkpoint of some sort, and was told, the police asked if they could search his vehicle. He felt he had nothing to fear and just and said, "Sure. I mean, I've got nothing to hide." He's moving, so his car was loaded up with all kinds of his personal belongings. They found his firearms, which were locked and disassembled, and he was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. Ended up doing at least a few years in prison before he ultimately got pardoned. But
wow, see, that's scary. That's really scary because I mean, I'm planning, crossing fingers, to be moving to South Carolina in the next 2 years, and I mean, obviously, I'm going to have to drive. That's a lot of states to drive through. I mean, once I get to like Virginia, I'd probably be okay. But I mean, I'm going to have to go through Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, a little bit of Delaware and Maryland.
Yes. Ugh. Although I know recently Virginia actually had reciprocity with a great many states when it came to concealed carry permits. And recently, thanks to more Democrats being elected, they rescinded that. So most, I don't remember if there were any that were retained, but there were at least several states that Virginia had reciprocity with that it no longer does.
Of course.
but yeah, what drives me insane is the fact that these laws that are supposedly put in place, we're told because it'll protect you from gun violence. The only thing I see happening is law-abiding citizens attempting to follow the law, being arrested anyways. Meanwhile, criminals getting away with their crimes. And of course, all the police can do is clean up after the fact.
Right.
But had there been law-abiding citizens carrying, there might not have been a crime to begin with, which was my whole point with Mollie Tibbetts.
Right. There was just a situation a few years ago that I was talking about actually earlier today. This local fellow, he was like at a soccer game or something with his like baby mama and his kid. And I don't know, he got mad about something and he like walked a couple blocks, broke into some random woman's home, took a kitchen knife, stabbed her to death, stole her car, drove to the local mall, crashed the car into the mall, and then went on a stabbing rampage in the mall and then killed another 2 or 3 people in like a Bertucci's or something, and was ultimately stopped because there was like a corrections officer or something that was off duty and had his concealed carry permit, and the CO shot the guy, and that's what stopped it. But I mean, he killed several people, and like one of them, he stabbed a pregnant woman, like I don't even know, it was like a dozen times or something. Luckily, she ended up being okay somehow. But it's another situation where a law-abiding citizen is what stopped the mayhem, and the police.
With a gun. Meanwhile, the assailant had a knife.
Right.
Of course, we're told if people just didn't have guns, there would never be any crimes.
Right. Ridiculous. I mean, and the philosopher over on Twitter, for a while she was posting every day a defense of gun use, and that just goes to show that there is one every day. The CDC study that Obama drafted to research gun violence, I forget what it came out to, but of how many times that they determined guns were used in self-defense, but it was like a really ridiculous number of how often
It was
that
something
happens.
like, I'm pretty sure it was something like 600 cases per day.
Yeah, something like that.
And
It
in
was
93%
insane.
of the cases, the firearm wasn't even fired. It was just a matter of the person, brandishing their firearm, saying, get out of my house, or whatever the case may be, and that put an
Right.
end to it.
Right.
Which, of course, anyone who's done the research knows the whole statistic, 93 people die from gun violence per day, is completely bogus. About 2/3 of those are suicides, and the homicide doesn't, and they classify homicides as including legitimate self-defense shootings or shootings involving police officers,
Right.
not actual murders. But that's, okay, so at best, that's maybe 10 legitimate murders with guns per day, which is horrible. But when you consider a population of 300 million people, it's actually, and I forget, also excluding known gang violence, but
Right.
legitimate 10 murders not involving gang violence per day. Any amount of murders is too many murders, but in a population of 300 million people, I'd say that's not so bad. Meanwhile, some 600 people are legitimately using guns to protect themselves every day. And in 93% of those cases, the firearm isn't even discharged.
Right. And let me tell you, as a therapist that has worked with people that have attempted suicide, it doesn't matter if they have a gun or not. They will try anything. They will try whatever is available. I legit had someone try to, actually, they tried to cut their main arteries in their arms with a steak knife, and they were successful. It just took longer than they expected, and so they were found. But I mean, it's a perfect example. I've had people try to swallow lithium batteries. Like, people will use whatever's available to them. If they just happen to have a gun, then they'll use a gun. Otherwise, I mean, you could use pretty much anything to try to attempt suicide, honestly.
Oh yeah, and for those watching, if I'm not mistaken, I posted the sources for this in my video, "What Really Causes Mass Shootings." But I did the research, and although the data was not necessarily as good as it could be, given the nature of some of the countries that were involved, but when it came to evaluating which countries have higher suicide rates per population, most Asian countries actually have higher suicide rates than the United States. And most of those countries with the higher suicide rates have far more draconian gun laws than any state in the US.
Right? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So clearly, gun laws are not the solution to any of these problems.
Yeah, certainly not. I think the research has been done. It's just the people on the left are ignoring it. But the vast majority of the things they're crying about could have been stopped by law-abiding citizens with firearms. And the vast majority of laws that they propose when these tragedies occur only will do nothing but work to arrest law-abiding citizens who are attempting to protect themselves. And when we have cases like Mollie Tibbetts, where perhaps an appropriate lesson to learn is maybe more young women should be learning how to use firearms and carrying. Instead, they make it all about this poor Elizabeth Warren, I think, said, this poor illegal immigrant. If Trump weren't so mean to the illegals, maybe he wouldn't have killed this lady. Which,
oh my God.
I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut because there's plenty of obscenities I could say about her. But
oh yeah, I don't even get me started on Elizabeth Warren.
Taking a look at the chat, I see Hey Dude 77 says, "Can I have a wrench?" I don't know. Can you?
I think he means the little wrenchy thing.
Oh,
that means they're like a chat admin. I don't know how to do that, but then again, I never do my own live stream.
Okay. I will work on getting you one, Hey Dude, if you would like. But I usually try to keep these streams no more than an hour. We're coming up on 45 minutes here, so we'll probably be done pretty soon. I mean, don't get me wrong. I could run my mouth for 4 hours straight, but I seriously doubt anyone would actually watch it that long. So, yeah. Conservative Californian says no taxation, even with representation.
I agree with that.
Yes, I agree. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, I recently put out a video called "Taxation is Theft and the Social Contract is BS. Get over it." I believe it is one of my finest pieces. So please check that out.
Actually, one of the reasons why we moved our 5-year plan to a 2-year plan to get out of the state is there was so Massachusetts had originally upped the sales tax, and it was supposed to be just a temporary thing, and the higher sales tax was supposed to be up this year, but the state did not want to lose out on any money, so they like cut this deal where the state Congress said to the governor, like, well, okay, like, we'll let you put the minimum wage up to $15 without running a vote in order to keep the sales tax. So it was like this weird backdoor thing that they did. There was like no public hearing on, there was no vote about it. So now the minimum wage is going to be $15 in like 2 years, and the sales tax stays higher. It's great stuff.
Oh yeah, certainly. I know it's funny how this really wasn't the topic of the stream, but since we're on the subject, I never tire of pointing out the fact that like California, for example, has been raising the tax on their highest, has been, for all the people who are saying the U.S. should raise its corporate tax rate, California has raised their corporate tax rate to unprecedented levels to fund their increasingly large welfare state. And more every year, more and more corporations are leaving California and going to places like Texas. So obviously, if you raise, you can't just say we'll get more money by raising taxes. In fact, I've talked about in my video that I recently did about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I pointed out what's known as Hauser's Law shows that no matter what tax rates are, the U.S. government has never collected more than 20% of GDP. Reason being, once tax rates reach a certain point, the wealthy stop being productive or move somewhere where the tax rates are lower. And so once taxes are high enough, you end up making less money because everybody either stops working or leaves.
Yep. And that's been happening in California, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen to Massachusetts real soon, because we have tons of tech companies moving in. Right now, Boston is supposed to be like the hottest place for these tech jobs, even beyond Silicon Valley. So all these companies are coming in while the minimum wage is being, raised up and taxes are being raised up. And it's like, they're not going to last very long. I'm waiting for them to go and invade other places, and I don't want them to, because I want to be in other places.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Certainly is. All right, I'm going to take one last look at the chat box here, and then we'll probably wrap this up quick. FDA, SDA, the other thing, Hong Kong is the closest thing to an ANCAP society. It's true that Hong Kong is considered to be the most economically free nation in the world right now. And what's interesting about Hong Kong is that they have no natural resources of their own, yet they are one of the wealthiest and highest standard of living places on earth because of the fact that they have the least amount of government intervention in the world at the moment.
Remember a while back? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, MinCap Kid, thank you for your question, but I'm not going to talk about 9/11 conspiracies. All right, go ahead.
I don't know if you remember a while back, there was this huge thing where a bunch of like libertarians and ANCAPs were supposed to be moving to, was it Chile? Someplace in South America for this place, and they were going to call it Galt's Gulch. And it was supposed to be like this little like libertarian ANCAP community. And then, I don't know, I think someone embezzled some money. I don't remember what happened to it. Okay,
that I didn't hear about. I know I was listening to the Tom Woods show a couple of months ago, and there was someone on who was talking about building an artificial island that he intended to make an ANCAP society with.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, anyways, to everyone watching, thanks for being here. Nikki, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Great to hear your thoughts. I guess if you want to, like I said, I'm pretty sure all my followers already know who you are, but if you want to give a plug for your channel, by all means, please do.
All right. Well, so you can find me at youtube.com/c/libertydoll. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook as the Liberty Doll. And Gavin Mines, probably just search Liberty Doll and you'll find me.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at remembering all my handles. Oh, and I have an Instagram. I'm Liberty Doll on Instagram as well.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, I know. In the past few days, I've been trying to expand my amount of social media presences, lest the YouTube censors finally get to me, and I'm having trouble keeping track of it all as well. But
there's way too much.
Yeah, definitely. But as for everyone else, I will be putting out a video within the week with some updates for the channel that are coming for the fall season. So stay tuned for that. As always, thank you to all my patrons for your support, making my channel possible. And as always, that is my 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth.